There we go. I don't know now whether it records to your cloud or my cloud, Trudy. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. One of us is
Could be
going to have
interesting.
an audio. Yeah. All right. Let's admit Natalie Buckland. It's one of our trainees as well. So lovely to see so many familiar faces and names here today. Welcome along, everybody. So if you've only just arrived, we will be starting in 1 minute. You've still got just about enough time to grab yourself a pen and paper for jotting down some notes as we go through the webinar this evening. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to throw those into the chat section because I'll be keeping an eye on those and making sure that all of the best questions and none of the duplicate questions are ready for Trudy at the end. She'll be doing a Q&A session as we get towards the end of the session this evening. We've got Paula arriving. There we go. And Zoe. All right, welcome along, everybody. This is being recorded. So if you wouldn't mind keeping yourselves on mute throughout the course of the webinar, just so we don't get any audio interruptions as we're going along. And then we will be sending out the recording to you tomorrow. All right, we are there. I think it is now 7:30 on the money. I'm going to be very challenged here now because the people are arriving. I want to read the bio. I need to be in 2 different places at once. So
I could help you. Don't think I can. Wait a minute. Let me just have a little look.
Have a look if you can. Otherwise, don't worry. I'm a good multitasker.
No, it won't
go.
let me.
All right, don't worry. Okay, so welcome along, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody that's here either knows Trudy or they know me via NLP for Kids. And some of you may have already come across Trudy because I don't know how long ago now, like maybe a year or so ago, we did our podcast together, didn't we? It may even be longer than that. So for those of you that are not familiar, I have a podcast called the People Building Podcast, shameless plug of my own stuff. And Trudy was one of my most awesome guests who came along and told me not just about her life story, which in itself is very interesting, but also quite a lot of the backstory to how magical change came about, which is what she's going to be sharing with you today. So if you haven't already listened to that podcast, go to any of the podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you want to look up the People Building Podcast and you will find Trudy's episode there. I would highly recommend it. It's also very funny because Trudy is a funny lady. So Trudy's background is working with the Samaritans. So that was where I think she really got that make a difference itch started. And actually on the podcast, there are some very humorous and actually very heartwarming stories about her time working with the Samaritans. So yeah, she was helping people in trouble from a very early age and went on to become a teacher. Teaching was all she ever really wanted to do. And I think I'm right in saying that Trudy was probably the first person in her family to go to university to do her studying. Is that correct? Have I got that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So she started a teaching career, teaching English from primary and then all the way through into sixth form and secondary education, and even got to a stage where she was working as a Senko. So for all of you who are here with some knowledge of neurodiversities and spectrum disorders, Trudy is well and truly clued up on that. In fact, she probably was dealing with that stuff before they even had their titles. So it was as a result of that work that I guess the beginnings of the magical change system started to come to fruition. And from there, she went on to set up a performing arts school. So this was up in the northeast of England. I think I'm right in saying that it was incredibly successful, several awards won, and was one of the most successful theatre training performance art franchises in the northeast of England at that time. And this was where Trudy really got to cut her teeth with the magical change stuff, and had some wanton experimentation with the children that she was coming across. They had all sorts of dramas about coming into their drama sessions, and she was helping them over those hurdles and finding that the more she refined this system, the better it was working and the more reliable it became. And just to add into the mix as well, Trudy is also an NLP for Kids practitioner. So she trained with us a long time ago. She also has a sort of personal interest in neuroscience and autism. And so she does her own self-development in those areas so that she can learn as much as possible about the minds of the children that she is working with. So without further ado, please welcome our speaker for this evening, Trudy Hindmarsh.
Well, thank you, Gemma. What an introduction. My God, I can't live up to that. So I'll do my best to try and be funny at relevant times. I can't promise that you'll all be rolling in the aisles, but I'll do my best. So I just want, before I start, to just explain what this course is about. It's going to last for 9 sessions. And the second one is going to be this week. It'll be on Thursday at 7:30. And then we'll miss a week, and then we'll have another 2 sessions the week after. And that's because I have to work around my bread and butter work, which is not magical change. I teach speech and drama to exam level to individual children, which has also taught me quite a lot that's gone into the magical change mix as well. So those are the sessions, and we'll be finished and sort of wrapping up on the session front in the early part of December. So anybody who joins us will be part of a team that I've called the Pioneer Team, and we'll get together, we'll gather together in a Facebook group, so long as I get the Facebook group sorted out, because at the moment I'm inviting people and it's not playing ball, but I'll get to the bottom of that one. So this group, this Pioneer Team, is going to be my launch pad into teaching people in the wider field. So far, I have taught people who've become, that they've used it. I can't say they're child practitioners because I haven't trained child practitioners as yet, but I did teach some Stagecoach principals who were in the same position as I was. And I'll come to that once I get the talk going, and I'll explain what happened with them. And then more recently, I trained a group of friends and who were then acquaintances but are now friends, people that I knew had an interest in this area. And again, I'll come back to that. So when this course is finished, you will get a certificate saying that you now have access to the knowledge to be able to do this. And what I really wanted was people in this team to have access at the moment, because it's one thing telling you about these things, but if you can't actually operate it at the time, it's a bit like learning how to operate computers. If you don't practice it, you forget it and you lose touch with it, and then you lose confidence in trying it. So I wanted people that were ready to go and already had children in mind that they could use it with. So what do I want to do with this? Well, I don't want to franchise it. I don't want licensed practitioners. I don't want all of that stuff. I'm at the time of my life where I don't want another massive business. I'm not going into it for the business. I'm in it for the kids. So the more people that I can train to get the same results that I've been getting, the better. And I wouldn't be making this offer to you if I didn't think that you were capable of doing that. And it's taken me 10 years to convince myself that I've got to that happy place. So I've tested it every which way I can with the resources I've got at the moment. And I'm now convinced that virtually anybody with a heart and with a brain can do this. And if you're motivated to help that child, the child will know. And that at the end of the day is what's going to make the difference. And that's the difference between children coming to you and children going to CAMHS. And thereby hangs another long story about CAMHS. I hope I haven't got any CAMHS people on here tonight. If I have, I don't blame the people who are in it. I blame the system. I think the system stinks. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to talk you through what happened to me. One of the reasons it's called Magical Change is that's how it seemed to me to be that day. I was absolutely punch drunk with the effect of what had happened. So I'm going to take you all the way through there up to where I am today so that you know where all the strands have come from. I'm then going to be telling you about the framework that I work within. So how I would set it up, how I would set a meeting up with a new child and their family. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the importance of the stories that I tell. And what we'll be doing on Thursday is we'll be exploring your own stories, because it's better that you have your own version of my stories than you have mine. If you don't have one that matches the situation, I'm happy for you to pinch mine. You can, if you want to be absolutely honest with the children, you can say this happened to a friend of mine, but equally, I'm happy for you to say it happened to you as well. So part of what I think the success of this is that we are not rising above these kids. We're not making ourselves be somebody who is an expert, who's passing down knowledge to them that they have to do. We're letting them know from a very early stage that we are as vulnerable as they are. And with experience, we found a way through that. And I think that that's probably what happens in any support group that anybody joins. And that's why they get a lot of power from it and a lot of information from it, because they feel open to listening to people who've had similar experiences to themselves. So I'm going to share my screen with you now. Just bear with me a minute. So I've called it Magical Change. This is my logo. I devised it because I've got an adult with a child. The child is lifted up on a level with the adult. It isn't being spoken down to. I've used colours that where this pointer comes down to what the child thinks is going on and what the adult hopes is going on. And I don't call it counselling because I don't believe it is counselling. I believe it could actually work if I had no idea at all what the matter was with the child. So I call it emotional support for kids. And they're not being a case with me. They're not coming to me to be on my caseload. I tell parents that I'll only keep the absolute minimum of information just to aid my weakened memory on some issues, but I don't take detailed notes, and that seems important both to the kids, I think, and to the adults too. So where on earth did all of this start? Well, it all started with Amy. Now, you might be a bit shocked to see that I'm calling Amy Amy, and I've got a photograph of her. But the reason I have is because that's what she wanted. So she has always said to me, you can tell anybody about my situation because it made such a huge difference to me. And if it makes a difference to somebody else, that's brilliant. Now, she was 9 at the time. This is 10 years ago, so she's left school now. And I have been in contact with Amy recently, and we'll come back and have a look at how she's doing now. But at this stage, she'd been with me at, I had a franchise of performing arts schools called Stagecoach. And she'd been with me for a couple of years at this point. And it was the September, and her dad came and he said, I want to see you in person. He said, I want you to know that this has got nothing to do with Stagecoach, but she doesn't want to come back. So I said, oh, so what's the matter then? He said, oh, it's this bigger picture of anxiety that she's showing. And I said, which looks like what? He said, well, she's clinging to her mum all the time. She's not eating. She won't go to school. She won't go to friends' houses. And when it's been the worst, we had to take her to A&E with a panic attack. Now, that's shocking to hear about in a 9-year-old today, but 10 years ago, it was doubly shocking, and my face must have registered that. So I was trying to be helpful and throwing things in the air that might help her in some way. And I said, I have a method that I use with my 4-year-olds. Now, 4-year-olds were the youngest age that children could come to Stagecoach. And very often they would cry. And it didn't surprise me, because you say to your kids, don't leave me, don't talk to strangers, and then you leave them in a venue full of strangers, and why wouldn't they cry? But it started to interest me that they'd cry that first week. Then we had wonderful experienced teachers. They were brilliant at encouraging them, finding them a friend, making sure that they'd had a good time. The parents would come at the end, they'd have a chest full of stickers, a drink and a biscuit. Mum would say, have you had a good time? Yes. Are you coming back again next week? Yes. And they would come back again next week, but they'd cry again. Now, the teacher in me of, at that point, 30 odd years, thought, oh, these children are playing their parents. But because I wasn't having to teach the kids and I was superfluous to requirements, I could watch them and I could observe them. And I realized that their distress wasn't that. Their distress was genuine, but it was just misplaced. They did know that there was nothing scary going to happen, but something had triggered that distress response and they'd crumpled. So I started to experiment with taking them from their parents in a different part of the college. I'd tell them a joke across the place where they cried last week. If they cried outside a closed door, I'd make sure the door was open the next week. And I got so good at it that we had 7 classes of children of this age. And at the starts of terms, that would have been something like nigh on 100 children starting, aged under 4. And I could have some terms where after week 2, we would have no crying and we would have nobody that had left and hadn't come back to Stagecoach because they were too scared and the parents had agreed to let them leave. So I'm telling Amy's dad something of this, and I said, it probably won't do her a bit of good. I said, but it certainly won't do her any harm because it's only positivity. And he said, we'll try anything because we're desperate. So the following Saturday brings Amy, and she changed beyond all recognition. I've never seen a child so shut down. So she had a hoodie with the hood right up. She wouldn't look at me. She was hunched over. And as I sat looking at her, I thought, you think that what this is all about is that I'm going to scoop you up and drag you off into Stagecoach. And you're not going to listen to a thing I say until that happens. So I started off the chat to her and I said, before we start, darling, I just want you to know that you're not allowed to come to Stagecoach this week. And I think that was the only time she looked at me as if to say, what? That isn't what I was thinking was happening. And I said, no, this week you have to listen to me. And if you'd like to come back next week, wonderful, but you can't come this week. And I watched all of the tension ease from her stance and the way she was sitting. But there was nothing in the conversation that made me think I'd connected with her, anything I'd said to her made any sense, or that she was remotely interested. So I got no more eye contact from her. I got no verbal feedback at all. So by the time I'd finished and the family left, I thought, this is the last time I'm going to see them. The following Saturday, I'm in the entrance hall waiting for people to come in, and Amy's dad's there, and he's going, and I said, what? And he stepped out of the way, and she's standing behind him, just the same way she'd ever been any other week. And I was so shocked that I thought, oh, it threw me. I didn't know what to say. And then I thought, don't fuss her. Don't give her any reason to back off. She's brought herself here. Well, let's see how she manages. So I kept my eye on her, and she walked into all of the classes by herself. And she came up to me on the first morning and she said, I think it's going to be a 3 stick a week, Trudy. And I said, oh, that's wonderful, darling. How brilliant. How clever are you? And all the rest of it. Well, I was so mesmerised by that I rang the parents during the week and I said, what did you say to her to get her to get into the car to come? And the dad said nothing. I said, what? She decided herself that she was coming. He said, yeah. I said, oh, good. So then he said, actually, she's starting to stop doing the things she was doing. I said, what? Stuff not to do with Stagecoach? He said, yeah. I said, oh, good. So the following Saturday, he arrived and he came to me at the desk and he came across and he just leaned across and he whispered, she stopped doing all of it. And when I tell people that now, I still have that same feeling like somebody'd hit me over the head with a mallet. And I thought, Jesus Christ, what on earth happened there? And it's taken me 10 years to find out what the hell happened there. But it's been a very interesting 10 years. So I went to sit with her. Actually, there's an interview with her that I'll let you listen to next. So I won't tell you all of this story. You can't actually hear completely what Amy's saying, but I'm kind of recapping what she's saying. And I'll let you have a look at that now. Oh, now I'll stop sharing and then I'll put share with sound on it.
Okay, so Amy, it's lovely. Amy, it's lovely to see you after 2 years, and it's so lovely to see you and hear that life's okay for you now and that everything's looking up. And I suppose because it's been 2.5 years really since all of this happened, hasn't it, that things have changed and you've probably forgotten a lot of what went on. But in your own words, can you describe why we used the magic card with you?
It was like, so if I was sad, I would tell you and then you would sort of help deal with that and how to get through it next time if I was ever feeling the same way.
Okay. You see, the very first time I had the conversation with you, I didn't get any impression that anything I'd said to you you'd understood or was interesting to you.
I remember thinking like, how was it even possible to like not feel like, because when I used to get really sad and worried, I used to feel like I couldn't breathe and stuff like that, and I used to think like, how is it possible to overcome that? Like, so I didn't really believe that it was going to work.
Right. So all of that non-reaction, that was because you didn't believe a word I said. Well, that's brilliant. Okay. So as well, when you came out of that meeting, I thought, I'm never going to see her again. And when I talk about you, I also say this about when we very first spoke. I felt like you thought that I was going to scoop you up and drag you off back into class, because you sat all tense and you could see the tension all throughout your body.
I remember coming out, I remember saying, so you're excited to come back next time? I said to her I didn't want to go, and then she was saying, well, the best way to like overcome like not wanting to go is to actually go and do it and push yourself through it, and then you'll feel better.
Yeah, yeah. And then the first week afterwards, your dad came to meet us in the entrance hall, and your dad's going like this, like, and I said, what? And he stepped out of the way, and there were you, standing behind him, like you'd always stood with a lovely smile on your face. And I panicked a bit, because I thought, if I fuss you, you'll back off, and you'll get yourself back into the state where you didn't want to partake in anything. So I kind of almost cruelly didn't engage much in conversation with you. I just smiled and said how lovely to see you, and then I kept my eye on you, but I talked to people about shoes, so that you didn't. You remember that? Okay. So I do remember you coming up to me on the first morning and about part way through, and you said, I think it's going to be a 3-sticker week this week, Trudy. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I was flabbergasted by that. And I rang your dad and I said, so what did you say to her to get her in the car? How did you get her in the car? I was just baffled by it all. And your dad said that during that week you'd stopped doing, or you were starting to stop doing, a lot of the anxious behaviours that you'd been showing previously. And I said to him, what, things not to do with Stagecoach? And he said, yeah, all of it. Which was really like somebody had thrown a bucket of cold water on me. I couldn't get my head round how it had had any effect on that. And then do you remember the weekend after when you came into Stagecoach and I came and sat with you at break time?
Yeah.
And I asked you, how are you thinking differently now? Can you remember what you said to me?
I can sort of like, I can remember I was sitting there and you talking to us about, all I remember afterwards is just like being kind of happy. I can't remember. Like, I was glad
You just took a couple of seconds and you just looked away, and then you looked back and you said, I don't think I'll ever be afraid of anything else again in all my life, and I nearly fell on the floor. Because that was just such a dramatic thing to say, and you said it with such conviction that I believed you. And that was the start of me looking at what we'd done and thinking that it might help other people as well. So I don't think you perhaps know this, but because you were so brave that week, you were the first person out of over 50 people now who've all turned themselves around with all sorts of different things that's going on in their life.
I thought I was like, I don't know. I thought you were just like helping and trying to get other people to like join in, and they just did it themselves.
No, it actually wasn't about Stagecoach, the conversation I had with you. You know, it was lovely that you came back to Stagecoach, but it was about how your anxiousness was affecting you throughout with everything that you did, and it wasn't a happy place that you were in. But you kind of focused on putting yourself back into Stagecoach, and when you did that, I think you realised everything else wasn't as scary
Yeah,
either.
that did make it better how things from home were like making us like a bit anxious, and I was then bringing it into Stagecoach, which didn't help.
Mm.
And then things started to get a bit better, so
Right.
I started like having more fun and like talking to more people.
Okay.
Okay. Well, things Amy said were very interesting to me. So that was 2.5 years after it had originally happened. And as I say, Amy's an adult now. It worried me how little she remembered about the specifics of that conversation. And I thought, oh my God, she's forgotten what I've told her. So that means it's, I was catastrophizing about what I believed had made the difference up to that point. So I thought it was really interesting because she said, you spoke to me if I was feeling sad. I just remember feeling happy. So it was all about how she felt. It wasn't about what people said to her. And I thought that was so crucial. She didn't realize the impact of what she'd achieved for herself. She still doesn't. She's still a bit baffled by it all. She told her mum she wasn't coming back, and it seems like she thought her mum persuaded her, and yet her parents told me they hadn't influenced her. She'd decided. So all of these specific things had gone by with her. She didn't realize that these other 50 people had been helped. Well, those are now 150 people now. And this was the phrase that really got me. She said, I remembered it was something about stickers, but she didn't remember how she got the stickers or what the stickers were for. So one of the reasons that I've involved stickers in the early days was because I realised how much stickers mean to kids and how some of them are obsessed with them. On the other hand, some kids hate stickers and they won't have you stick anything on them at all. But for some, it's the real driver behind it. But it obviously wasn't for her. And I thought about it a lot because when you do the training, you'll see how important the sticker aspect is to the way they recover. But I decided that what she's not remembered the specifics about the stickers because she can swim now, and you don't think about your armbands when you can swim. It's that I've moved on now and I don't need that anymore. And she didn't mention in that conversation what I found out much later, which was she'd had a terrible bad patch. So her parents split up at the end of this period. So all of that turmoil must have been happening at the same time that she was having all of these panic attacks as well. So there was a lot of overlapping problem going on. But I found this quotation from Maya Angelou, which I think summarizes really what is at the basis of magical change. So at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They'll remember how you made them feel. So that's the impact it has. So if they trust you, and I'll tell this story about Gemma's training. So when I trained with her I don't know whether it was the NLP for kids training or it was the practitioner training, but it was the last day. And you might, I'm sure some of you will remember this exercise, but she put great big sheets of paper up all around the walls and wrote all these problems that kids could potentially have that you might come across. And then you had to go to each one and write down one of the NLP methods that you think might have an impact on that problem. And she left us doing that for ages, so long that I thought there's a rabbit off here. There's something's going to be sprung at the end of this. But the thing I thought was going to be sprung was that she was going to say all of those things that we've taught you in NLP are going to work for all of these problems. But it wasn't. It was more surprising than that, because she said, it doesn't matter what you do. It's about the relationship that you've got with the person. And I think Gemma and Maya Angelou have got it absolutely spot on. It is. It's about that. And I can't say it's only that, but without it, you won't get the rest of it coming. So after Amy's success, so on the day that she came back and Dad said she'd stop doing all of it, I was mesmerised. I just wandered about in a bit of a trance, and anybody who'd stand still long enough got this story. So I was telling them, so what do you think happened there? How can a child do that? What do you think's going on? And I was very fortunate in that two of the people I spoke to had an impact. So the first one was Liz. So Liz's daughter had been with me for 10 years, but I never knew what Liz did. And Liz was an educational psychologist, and she told me so. And I said, good, get in here. Come in here. I'll give you a cup of coffee and I'm going to give you this conversation and you tell me what's working there. So she very kindly listened to me and she said, on the face of it, it's fairly straightforward. She said, but there must be something about it that a child understands and B, thinks is doable. She said, you should contact the university about it. And I said, and tell them what? She said, well, there might be somebody doing some related research. And I probably never would have done that, except that my daughter was at university doing psychology at that time. And she gave me a contact and they invited me in and I told them all of these things that had been happening. By the time I walked out, I realised I was doing a piece of university research on it, which was a bit of another shock that came out of the blue. So that was Liz. The other one was Jude's mum. So Jude, we'd had him, he was 6. He'd been expelled from school by the time he was 6 for bad behaviour and for lashing out and violence and all sorts. And I told Jude's mum about it, and she said, oh, that's amazing, Trudy. And I said, it's a shame we don't have a magic card for Jude. And as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I thought, well, now that would be interesting, because this is not anxiety he's showing, this is bad behaviour. It's not bad behaviour he's showing me. If it makes a difference for him, then that's really going to be interesting. So I explained to her what was involved. She said, yeah, that's fine. So he comes to me at the end of the lesson. His mum's in the room. I have the same conversation with him. And I'm convinced that he is autistic. I don't know that for a fact, but everything about him that I know about autism now rings true for him. So he gave me no eye contact whatsoever. He was on a swing chair and he was just sitting, swinging, gazing at the ceiling. And I thought, oh, this is just going straight over his head. This is having no impact whatsoever. And we got to the end and I said, so are you going to take this challenge with me, Jude? And he said, yeah. I thought, I don't like the sound of that. That's not sounding very, very convincing. So I said, oh, well, if you are going to take this challenge with me, then we have to shake hands on it. I said, because that's what adults do. So he said, all right. So we shook hands and he left. And from there on in, it went tits up, because his mum doesn't tell his dad that we've even had the conversation. So dad comes the next week, picks him up, whips him off into the car while I'm talking to somebody about the blessed shoes again. And by the time I'm looking for him, he's gone. The following Saturday, I think in all the time I had Stagecoach, I was only off up at that point with illness 3 times, and I had a stomach bug the following Saturday. So this child had then gone 3 weeks with no positive reinforcement in between times. So I'm thinking we'll have to start again here, because he won't even remember what I said to him. So I'm walking down to meet him at the end of the lesson, and his mum's walking down the corridor in front of me. So I said, oh, just before I see Jude, can you just tell me how he's been doing this week? And she just stopped dead in the middle of the corridor, and she just looked at me and said nothing. And I went, it was just such a funny reaction. Oh my God, what's happened? So I said, what? She said, I can't describe the difference in him. He's like an entirely different child. And I'm still thinking the worst. So I'm thinking he's set fire to the Ruddy School now. What's happened now? So she said she had a son with her, an older son. She said, tell Trudy what he's been like. He said, well, he's been a lot better. I said, what, at school? He said, yes. And I filled up, because I thought, poor little devil. He's had no assistance whatsoever. He had an unpromising start. How amazing is that? So I meet him after the lesson and I said, Jude, tell me how many stickers you need this week. He said, it's definitely 3. So I said, right, so tell me why it's definitely 3. He said, because I've been trying all the time. I said, I know you have, darling. I'm so proud of you. Your mum's told me and it's amazing. I said, last week, I didn't think you were listening to me. And at this point, he's still swinging on his chair and gazing around, and he sat bolt upright and he stared into my soul and he said, but I was listening to you. And I went, well, that's me told, and I'm wrong again, and good lad for you. So he was my second one, and because he was so successful, it gave me the confidence. So really, magical change has changed me. It's given me the confidence to try with all sorts of problems, because as I always say to the parents, it might not work, but it isn't going to do them any harm. And so in my book, that's worth a try. So that's what happened. So it then started to intrigue me. I thought, well, is there something about this conversation I'm having that's got the magic bullet? And if I forget to say it, does that mean it won't work? So I decided that I would try and train some other people in my position as principal in other Stagecoach schools. And I didn't want to know them. So I didn't want to have any connection with them. So I booked a room in London, and I invited some people who were interested, and I had about 12. And I took a solid morning to train them. All of them could do it. All of them. And I didn't know these people. I didn't know what their personalities were. I didn't know how many schools they had, what their age groups were. So that again gave me a lot of confidence. So I then thought, well, if I can try it with children in school, so these are children who don't know me, because I thought, and I also believe that part of the thing was that I was the principal of the school. They knew me. That they must have thought, well, she must know something because she's running these schools. There's an element of that about it. But I thought, if I can go into some primary schools where the kids, I have no connection with them at all, and they don't know anything about me, and it worked, then that would be really interesting too. So I experimented. I had parents who were heads in different schools. So I went to a really rough school in Middlesbrough, which was from a really deprived area, but the school was fantastic and they did wonderful things with and for their kids. But the child that they gave me to work with taught me a lot, because he was one of only 2 people out of 150 who's ever said they won't take the challenge with me at the end of it. And if they won't take the challenge, I've got nowhere else to go. That's me finished. So with 2 of them, so I had 3, originally, who said no. I managed to talk one of them around. Of the other 2, one of them was the boy in this school, and he had, the headmistress had explained to me what a traumatic upbringing he'd had. He'd gone from pillar to post. This was about the 5th school he'd been in. And all she did was she gave me this room to go into with him. He had no support. There was nobody with him who knew him. There was no TA. There was no windows in this blessed room. He must have thought he was trapped. So those things taught me a lot about making sure that the atmosphere that you're working in is conducive to kids feeling comfortable before you even start talking to them. So he said he wouldn't take the challenge, and I couldn't persuade him otherwise. The other one has happened to me fairly recently, within the last 6 months, and it was a girl again who I think is showing autistic signs, and serious ones. She hasn't been to school for a year. Her dad wanted her to come and talk to me. She agreed to come onto the screen, but only if she could sit with her back to me, and I couldn't see any part of her. So I couldn't even connect. She never even saw me at all during all of it, and I couldn't persuade her either. But they are the only 2 out of 150, so I don't think that's a bad failure rate. So going into schools taught me a good deal. And then I had a whole series of things happen in my personal life, which was disastrous. So my dad had been living with me for 2 years. He had Parkinson's and he had depression. And it was a really stressful time, because we'd get him cheered up, and then 9 o'clock the following morning, he was back where he started from again. There was also a lot of stress within my business. My computers, well, not my computer system, the whole computer system for the whole company collapsed, and we were all back to pen and paper with everything. It was just a terrible time. And Gemma has my utmost respect here, because it was during this time that I went to one of her free training sessions in London. And it was one of these funny situations. So this is where the coincidences keep happening. So my son-in-law at the time, I'd bought a franchise for him, which was to renovate bathrooms. And because it was a franchise, I would get this email once every month, I think, or once every week from this company. And I never opened them. For 3 years, I never opened one of them. And this particular day, for whatever reason, I opened it and it was just a box like this screen we're on now, divided into 4. And one of the adverts in one of the corners was for Gemma and NLP for kids. And I remember thinking, NLP, that's something about counselling, isn't it? NLP. I was confusing it with CBT at this point. So I went onto her website and I saw that she was doing this particular session at a day when I was going to be in London for another reason, but I had nothing to do during the day. I was going for something in the evening. So I thought, well, this is perfect. I'm going to go. So off I toddled. And one of the activities that she did will remain with me forever. So I don't know what you call it, Gemma. What's the one with the 3 chairs? Is it the 3-chair principle? I don't know.
It's perceptual positions and actually an NLP for kids. So perceptual positions is like the grown-up NLP version. In NLP for kids, we have an alternative version, which is called a new point of view. And it's designed to get you to it's a self-esteem builder. So you see your circumstances from the perspective of someone that believes in you and from an observer, as well as from your own perspective as well.
Yeah. So she described that in this process, there were 3 chairs. You sat on the first chair. You talked about something you really wanted to do in the future. Then you got up and you sat on the chair and you talked as if you were somebody who really believed that you could do this thing that you had planned. And then the 3rd chair, you had to speak as if you were someone who just observed those 2 people speaking. And I was so excited to do this because part of the Stagecoach situation was we had senior students called further stages. And I thought they would just love this in drama. They'll think it's wonderful. So I was really, really looking forward to it. So she went A, B, all the way around this room, and I was the one who was doing it, and I was still excited. So I sat on the first chair and I told what I wanted to do with magical change and how I wanted to take it further forward and find out what that was at the bottom of it. Then I stood up and I moved to the 2nd chair and I went to sit down, and as soon as my backside touched the 2nd chair, I started to cry. I had no idea why I was crying and I couldn't shut up. So this poor lady that I was working with looked at me as if I was some kind of lunatic, because I just dashed to the ladies and I was crying in there. And then I thought I was slapping myself around and blowing my nose and carrying on. So I thought, God, get yourself out there. I opened the door to go back out into the room and I started all over again. So by the time I finally got back to this lady, this exercise was over and done with. So I didn't know what all of this was about, but I persuaded myself that what this was that the reason I'd gone to London was that one of my original students from Stagecoach had been admitted into a mental hospital in London, and I was visiting. And I'd gone and I'd had to wait for 2 hours before they'd let me in because the alarms kept going off in the hospital, which meant somebody was running amok in that particular mental ward. So it wasn't safe for me to go in. So these alarms kept going off, jangling my nerves. I thought that's what it's all about, this. So at the end of the session with Gemma, I went out. I said, I'm really interested in doing this, Gemma. I think it'll be really helpful to me. I'm just a bit stretched at the moment. So by the time I'd told her what my bit stretched was, she said, you're not to do this now. You're not to do it now. And that's why I respected her, because if she'd have been all about the money, she'd have had me signed up, because I was willing to do that at that point. So eventually my dad died. I did go and do the training with Gemma. And the first day on the training, I thought, oh my God, I'm past it. My brain won't work now. I can't take in all this new stuff. There was only, I think, 5 or 6 of us. And I was the only one who'd never done any NLP before. So there's a certain amount of jargon, as I'm sure you'll be familiar with, and all of this was going straight over my head. So by the end of the first night, I thought, I'm too old for this. I can't be doing with this. I'm obviously not cut out for it. So the second day, by the time some of this was getting repeated and some of it was sinking in, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I know what you mean now. I was getting the hang of it. And by the time I left after that training, I sat on the train to go home and I texted my daughter and I said, I've got good news and bad news. She said, what's the good news? I said, I've invented NLP. And she said, what's the bad news? I said, I'm 40 years too late. So that was how I realized that a lot of the aspects of what I was doing and what I was saying with the kids was NLP based. But I, as I say, I thought NLP was CBT. So then in 2017, oops, what's happened there? In 2017, I was really poorly and I was in bed for 5 weeks in total agony. No one's ever been able to tell me what was the matter with me. I was convinced I was dying because I couldn't imagine how it could be anything not serious for that to happen. And I couldn't actually walk when it was all over, when I could get out of bed. So I had to teach myself to walk again. I had to move house because I couldn't manage stairs. Again, traumatic time, all of this was. So I had to retire from Stagecoach because at Stagecoach I was running for most of the day, up and down corridors, in and out of rooms. I was never still. I couldn't do that anymore. So I thought I'd do some private work for Magical Change. I started my speech and drama work. So there was another career I started. And that's how I supported myself after leaving Stagecoach. I tried to go back and do the research. So I'd explained to the lady at the university when my dad was ill that I couldn't do it then. But she wasn't prepared to stick with me. So I'll be quite honest with you. She said, I don't think you'll ever do this. So I rather wish she was on here tonight, because I think it always does you a good favor when someone tells you won't do it, because the devil in you decides you will. However, what I'd done with the university was really useful, because she gave me, she told me how to sort your research out, what kind of research to do, how to annotate it. You know, I learned a lot from it. So I am grateful for the help and the encouragement they did give me at the time. Then, whilst I got a case that came to me through my speech and drama work. So one of the mums rang me and said that her niece was struggling, and that she'd woken in the middle of the night with the fire alarm going off, and that it had really frightened her, even though it was only a fault on the system. And she'd gone really downhill ever since. And it was like it's what I say happens, which is that the fear and the anxiety bleed sideways. And she'd started off then worrying about, well, where else were the fire alarms that could go off? And then because it had happened at night, she started to be afraid of everything to do with going to bed at night. And it had got to such a point that they even had a baby alarm in her bedroom so she could talk to them to make sure they were still there. So it had deteriorated. So I said, yes, of course, I'll try and help her. So what I found out was that her dad was a headmaster and her mum was a senior teacher in a primary school. And when I went to see her for the last time, I said, what I really need is the chance to go into a school and work with half a dozen kids on a longer basis than I'd done previously. And I said, what I really want is kids who've got all sorts of different problems. So the dad immediately said, oh, come to my school. So along I trotted, and the Senko was asking me what sort of cases I wanted. And I said, well, just different ages, different problems. I don't mind whatever you want to give me. Just at this point, in came the headmaster, ranting and raving about this particular boy. And I said, who is this? Who you're talking about? Well, the way he described him, he was like some Machiavellian monster from outer space. He said he's a liar, he hits disabled children, he's a racist. All of this big, long description of this child came out. I said, I love him as well. So I had 7. Now, if that boy, I imagine some great hulking youth who was going around bullying people right and left. He was this weak-looking, puny little lad in year 6, undersized for his age. And if he isn't autistic, I'll eat hay with a horse. But from the age of 4, he'd been labelled as a bad child. The school had started to have difficulty with him when they'd let the class go, and he'd been trapped in the cloakroom with everybody pushing and shoving, invading his space, and he was just lashing out right and left. And so, as often happens in school, mums tell their children, don't play with him, don't have anything to do with him. And it's amazing how quickly that grows and the word spreads, and that child was labelled. So I did a proper research project with these people using the research information I'd had from the university. And one of the sessions on the course, I'll be going through that research and talking about the children that did it and what they said and what their problems were. So then I formed a pilot group. This was of people I knew who were either working with children or were the kind of people that I thought would be brilliant at working with children. And I trained those. And a most remarkable result, I think, came out in what I sent to you in one of the emails, which is one of the girls was one of my students at Stagecoach. So when I trained her, she'd left school. She was a talented girl. She'd been in the West End in Billy Elliot. I trained her. She never really told me what was happening as she'd gone along, but this is what happened. So she was helping somebody out with her choir, and a family came with a girl that joined in with the choir willingly, and the other one who kicked off and had tantrums and meltdowns and everything, and wouldn't join in. And Annabelle had said to her mum, I think I can help your daughter if you'll let me try. So the short answer to that was she did for several weeks. The mum, which I thought this was astonishing, so the mum put a Facebook page where her daughter was named, and she was talking about the difficulties her daughter had and praising Annabelle for what a difference she'd made to the whole of the family. And it's had such an impact on Annabelle that she's trained in NLP and in hypnotherapy as well. And that's what she wants to do for a living now. So this is what I mean about magical change doesn't touch the kids. It touches the people who work it as well, because you see such fantastic results from things that look really depressing when you start out. And within all of this, I kept seeing similar behaviour traits happening, and I started to get interested in autism. And I've been a teacher now for 48 years. I must have taught thousands upon thousands of autistic kids in that time, and I've only been aware of a handful who had a diagnosis. But what I really and truly believe now is that it is so common and so underreported and underdiagnosed and understood that I think it's shameful that every teacher isn't educated in the signs of autism. And I think that a huge number of the children that I've helped have been autistic. And that's been one of the revelations to me, that in actual fact, the children who I think are autistic respond certainly as well as, if not better, than children who are not on the autistic spectrum. And that's another thing I'm going to be looking at on the course, about why that might be and what do they get from it and what do they understand from it. And finally, here I am training you today, and I feel very privileged and I feel very humbled that you've all turned out for me when I'm sure you've got better things to do on an evening. And I am grateful that I've got this opportunity to let other people know what can happen. So I did put this in one of the emails that I sent out. And I said, there's good news and bad news. And the good news was anybody can do it. And the bad news is there's no magic bullet. So this is what 10 years has taught me, that I shouldn't have been surprised. Everybody's different. Everybody takes from the technique what means something to them, what they can relate to, and what they think they can do. And all of these things I've listed. There's probably 100 and other strands as well. Is it big enough for you to read for yourselves? Yeah, okay. But these are all things that I don't just think are effective. I know they are, because I've had people tell me. So either the kids tell me, their parents tell me, teachers have told me. One of the questions I ask when I've finished Magical Change with somebody is, what do you think was most interesting to your child from this? So it's part of the information I gather in. And these are all things that have been said to me by kids, or I've noticed with my own eyes. And we'll be incorporating all of these things into how I tell you you need to run your conversation with the people that you're working with. So the advantages of using Magical Change are it works. That's the biggest advantage. It can be delivered by a non-professional, so you don't need to go to university and have a PhD. The other big thing it does is it empowers the child. That's the biggest difference I see afterwards, is that the child looks different. They hold themselves different. They talk differently. They react differently. It's a positive experience for the child, the family, and for the deliverer. And it involves the child's family in the process. Now, that was really, really important to me. I had a close friend whose daughter had mental health issues, and she went to CAMHS. And I think, obviously, the first time the mum was allowed to go with her, but thereafter she was kind of hived off from the family. And in the end, my friend took her daughter away from CAMHS because she felt that CAMHS were trying to infer that the reason she felt the way she was, the way she did, was because her parents were putting her in cotton wool and not letting her do things. So this kid sort of went in with one problem and came out with the makings of another one. Now, it's really important to me as part of what I do that the parents hear what you're saying, because they can back you up with the same vocabulary when you're not around. And if you had a child who was having difficulty, would you want to be sidelined and alienated and not know what's going on? And I certainly wouldn't if it was mine. And so I feel, and I know from things that have been said, that various adults have also benefited from listening. So I'll give you one story. So this is back in Stagecoach days. A little girl moved from the early class up into the main school, and she had a male teacher for the first time, and this completely threw her and she panicked. So I did the Magical Change conversation with her. And I said to her as part of it, how do you feel when you're feeling anxious? She said, it feels like I've got a big bubble in my tummy and it just keeps getting bigger. And I said, well, that sounds dreadful, dear. We don't want that. We'll have to see what we can do about that. The very next week, she came back. I said, how are you feeling this week? She said, my bubble's popped. And her mum was in the room, and her mum filled up. I mean, she couldn't hold it together, really. She was very moved by it. About 6 weeks later, I'm walking down the corridor and this girl's mum comes up to me. She said, I've used the magic card. I said, oh, have you? Who have you used it with? She said, me. I said, what do you mean, you? She said, well, I've been bullied at work for the last 2 years, she said, and I kept thinking to myself, it'll go away, they'll leave, somebody will notice, I'll just shrug it off. She said, all the usual things you tell yourself. She said, but I thought, if a 7-year-old can pop a bubble, I'm damn sure I can. So I said, so what have you done? She said, well, I've put in an official complaint. And I'm panicking like that. Oh, Jesus, what have I set off in action here? What's going on here? But the parents are in the situation. I'm not expecting very little from them during the conversation. So they are listening without needing to interact. And I think that's made a big difference to quite a lot of parents. A number of them have said so. It's cost effective, it's time effective. So these are some of the feedback from kids that, these were written for me by parents. So this was the girl I was talking about. Before, I felt like a bubble was growing inside me. Now the bubble has popped. She was 7. Jamie had tics. He was twitching and flicking and doing all sorts, and it was a different something every week. And he said something so profound. He said, you see, I didn't know I could change. I thought I was born like that. And I thought, yeah, I'll bet you did, because for all the right reasons, your family would say, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll grow out of it. Your uncle used to do that and your dad used to do that or whatever. And so the kid goes, oh, yeah, well, so it's genetic. So the fact that the behavior could be altered was really fascinating. And he was fab. Hopefully I'll have a chance to tell you that on the course another time, what happened with him. And then this boy, I loved this kid so much. I thought he was such an old head on his shoulders, and I hated the way his class teacher treated him. I thought it was shameful. But he said, I feel I'm more knowledgeable and I can focus more. I feel calmer and less odd. I feel proud of myself and feel I can be more successful, more focused, and in less trouble. And he's 11. So when you get things like that, it's a joy. So we're back to Amy. So what about Amy? So I asked Amy to just record a little message to the camera, because as you realise from the video, we couldn't always hear her very clearly. So this is what she had to say.
Now I look on the positive side of things and have ways of coping with my worries. I am able to make a brave choice now.
She said she looks on the positive side of things and doesn't worry as much, or words to that effect. Now, I said I'd bring you up to date with Amy. So I was in contact with her only 2 days ago. And I said, Amy, in the past, in training, I've used your story, I've used your name, I've used your photograph, and I'm happy to drop any or all of those things if that's what suits you now. And she said, absolutely not. No, I want you to still use me for it. And she wrote me this to give to somebody who I'm about to start working with this week, who's been attempted suicide twice. She's 15. She won't go to school. Her mum's at her wit's end with her. And so this is what she's written. I thought I'd send you a message telling you a bit more about me and how I understand what you're going through. I used to love going to school and Stagecoach, making new friends and doing the things I enjoyed. But then all of a sudden I began feeling quite overwhelmed by these things, which was quite strange because they were things I'd done for years without a second thought. I felt sudden bursts of panic and nervousness, which would make my heart beat fast, give me a sickly feeling, and often brought lots of tears. I stopped doing the things I loved. I wanted to quit Stagecoach and I refused to leave the house to go to school. My parents took me to CAMS, but I didn't have a great experience with them. But then Trudy approached me with an idea. I will admit I was hesitant at first, but I hated the way I was feeling so much that I thought it was worth a try. The magic card method set me on a path towards getting back to my usual self. However, the only way to truly start getting back to a happy version of yourself is to want to help yourself. No one can force you into self-care. It has to be a decision you make. It takes effort, determination, and willpower to keep at it. But in my personal experience, it changed my life. Yes, that seems dramatic, but going from self-isolation, not doing new things, and missing out on learning at school to experience countless opportunities that in the past I would have been far too anxious to say yes to, it really has changed my life. Trudy supported me so much even after the magic card. It's important for you to know that how you feel is normal to lots of people. Before I knew this, I thought I was going crazy, having all these feelings about things that everyone else just seemed to get on with. But please don't feel alone and make sure to look after yourself. However you feel comfortable doing so. You can ask Trudy for my number if you ever want to chat about anything. That chokes me. I think that's just magical. And I'm very grateful to her for that. And the future. Well, I don't know what the future is, but I'm hoping that the people who form this pioneer team with me will be part of that future, because I don't know whether people will want us to train people in schools. I don't know whether they'll, I don't know what. I really don't know. I just know that I'm not physically capable of standing and doing face-to-face training anymore. So there are other people who would be in better situations, I'm sure. And I can't give you any more direction than that because I don't know where it's going from here. So I'll stop sharing now. So what I said I would do next is I would tell you about the framework. Now, I think it's really important with the framework in that I talk to the parents without the kids being anywhere near. So I'll do it over the phone or on a Zoom chat, but the kids are not involved at that point. And I just let the parents tell me what they want to tell me. If there's things I think they've missed out, then I'll prompt them, but I just let them offload. Then I tell them that there's no guarantees come with this. I can't guarantee that it'll work, and I can't guarantee that their child will say yes to taking on the challenge with me. And I'm very upfront, and I say at that point we have to part company because I can't work in that situation, and they understand that. I tell them that I need them to be in a space where the child is in front of me, they're behind them, but to the side. So I want to be able to clock the parent's expressions whilst the child's talking to me. But I say to them, if I don't look at you and I don't speak to you, that's good, because that means I've got a connection with the child. So don't be miffed if you're not included. That's the positive aspect to it. So I think what that helps them to do is to listen, as I said before, with no expectation of having to get involved. And so they can take it in. They've got time to mull it over. I also tell them this, that I will ask the child what their problem is, and whatever the child tells me their problem is, that is what I'm going to work with. I'm not going to work with what you tell me the child's problem is. And I explained that the reason I do that is because that's just me forcing the child to do something that it doesn't want. And what I've discovered is if I work with what the child thinks is the problem, then what the adult thinks is the problem also gets better, because the pressure's off. And like I say, anxiety bleeds sideways, so does confidence. You give a kid some confidence somewhere and it has this knock-on effect into other areas of their life as well. So I make sure that they understand that. And the last thing I make sure they understand is that they have to stick with it until the child has completed their magic card. Now, that was something I didn't do at first. I didn't mention it. I didn't think about it, in all honesty. But then what I discovered was that for some parents, not that I charged them a lot, and I didn't and don't, but for some parents, it was all about, oh, well, we don't want to do any more sessions now. We think she's better now. And at that point, because I hadn't explained it up front, then I didn't think that I could come and say, well, you know, I don't think you're right here. Because all that does is this is just one other adult who's just strung you a line and told you a whole load of crap and hasn't kept their promises. And so I explain that to parents now, and I say, you know, we're in it for the long haul until they finish their magic card and they can see what they've achieved and how far they've come. And a lot of what gets involved in the framework are stories. So the power of stories is immense, as we all latch onto them. But I tell them stories about things that happened to me when I was a child. And they're key to explaining to them that might be something similar that's happened to them in their past. And I think they go, oh, well, here's an adult. Oh, these things happen to adults, do they? Oh, and she's still alive and she still survived. So if she's done it, I can do it. There's an element of that with it. So one of them I tell, which was probably the one that Gemma's thinking about, which was funny, which is I always say to them, I had no teeth when I was 5. And they all go, what? I had no teeth. Why did you have no teeth? Well, my mum gave me a dummy, which you can't buy anymore. But it had, underneath the teeth, it had like a little bowl. And she used to put a spoonful of honey in that and give me the dummy. So you can imagine the effect that this had on my teeth. So by the time I was 5, I had to have every tooth in my head taken out. But of course, it was in a series of visits. And as I say to the kids, dentists in my day were not the smiley, happy, here's a sticker kind of dentist that we have these days. And I was utterly terrified of dentists. And I can actually remember thinking this as a child. Why is it whenever I've got to go to the dentist, everybody's talking about dentists? That woman on the bus was talking about dentists. There's a dentist on the telly. There's a dentist in my book. There's a dentist here, there, and everywhere. Well, of course, now I know that you see what you look for. But that was a puzzle to me at that time. So then when all these teeth came out, that wasn't the end of it, because then when the second teeth came in, they had no little ones to guide them in. So they all crossed over and I had to have more teeth taken out to make room. And this is why I have this wonderfully sexy gap between my front 2 teeth now, because they didn't give me a proper brace. I went into my teenage years having braces on and having to go and have those tightened. It was just a nightmare. I can remember when I was about 11, I think, I remember thinking, I'm fed up of being afraid of the dentist. I'm going to stop it. And even into adulthood, I used to think to myself, I wonder what I did. I wonder what it was I did to stop myself being afraid of the dentist. And now I don't think I did anything at all. I think I just decided that day that I was going to stop it. And I tell the kids that's the biggest, I tell them that just before I ask them, are they going to take the challenge with me? Sometimes. So it's making that decision that's going to make all of the difference. So there will be more stories further on in the course. So I just want to recap what I'm trying to get from this pioneer team. So I'm wanting a group of people who have experience at working with children to try this technique, to feedback what's happening for them. Because what I want to do is make courses to go to a wider field after Christmas in the new year. So I would be using your experience. I'd be acknowledging your contribution to that in writing as part of my course. I'm giving you the course at half price from what I'm intending to charge for it when the time comes. I hope that it'll be exciting for you to be there at the start of something that's happening. I think there's always something quite galvanizing about that. That's the word. You will have access to my finished wider training, should you want it, when it's out there. I will send you a certificate at the end of the course saying that you've got access to all of this information. And I will give personal support to the group like I've done to my other groups previously. So if you have things that crop up and you're not sure what to do or how you might play it, then we'll all have suggestions, I'm sure. And that there's something lovely about being supported. And that's something lovely about being supported for the kids in Magical Change as well. That's what they feel, that there's somebody there for them. So thank you so much for listening so patiently. And I think we might be going to a Q&A.
We are going to a Q&A. So first question is in from Priya. How many sessions to complete the magic card? Can you tell beforehand approximately how many sessions will be needed?
There are spaces for about 40 to 45 stickers on the card. And the answer to that question is how long is a piece of string? So if the child's going to only award themselves one sticker every week, then it's going to take a long time. However, I say to parents, because obviously parents ask this question a lot, I charge them when I do it for the conversation plus the first 6 sessions. And then I tell them it's going to take another 10 sessions after that minimum.
Yeah. And
then I explain to them that I would charge them pro rata after that, week by week. So they're not buying into a block after that. And I haven't had any difficulty with parents understanding that, you can't, there's no definitive answer to that question.
Is there a ideal frequency to how often the sessions occur? So would you ever do a couple of sessions a week, or is it always once a week, every other week? What works? No,
I always do it once a week. I try not to let it go 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks they can't retain what's happened very often, particularly if they're little ones. But part of it is they're assessing their own sticker allocation. And for them to remember past a week is asking a bit much, really.
Yeah.
So I would say weekly. I don't think you want to be there twice a week. You need to give them chance to have a good run at it and to have a bad day and then have a good day after the bad day. The problem is if you're doing it too frequently, you might be picking up on too much of the negative that might be happening. So I think a week's about right.
Okie dokes. Can we see on the screen here today, how does it look? And I think that Silvana is talking about the sticker card.
Oh,
if I were in the office, I would have mine to hand, but I'm not. So I cannot help on this one. Lots of questions coming in about age range. I will address those ones in just a second because I can see you've all got some similar ones there that you're asking.
The answer is no, I haven't got one to hand. I can tell you, I can describe to you what it's like. So if I'd have designed the sticker card, I couldn't have designed it better, but it is a commercially available one. And I talk the child through the sticker card. So it's one that has a witch on it who's doing a magic spell with a cauldron. And then as you open it up, you see a wizard who's doing a magic spell. And there's a cat looking terrified in the corner. And then as you open it out completely inside, the cat is right up front, looking very pleased with itself and proud. And the wizard and the witch are there. So I talk them through, I ask them to tell me what they can see. So that they chat about that. And then I get to the end and I say, and at the moment, you're that cat hiding in the corner there. So that's where you are now, but this is where you're going to be. And so we open up the card and there they are looking, smiling. And I talk about, you know, what's the cat thinking? Oh, well, he looks proud. He looks happy. Yeah, he looks all of those things. And what's that dropping down on his head? It's a certificate. And there's an owl flying across with something that they're dropping. I mean, if I could have designed it, I couldn't have done it any better. It's amazing. And the impact of seeing that picture, I think, is huge for some kids. So I have, as part of the course, will let anybody who wants to have a practice session with a child. So I have a child volunteer, and she was a magic card girl of mine. And at one point, I'll read you something that a mum sent to me, an email a mum sent to me. So it's had a huge impact on her. She still has her magic card from years ago. She still goes and looks at it, she says. So this visual aspect of having something that was proof to you of what you did and reminds you of success, I think is good. And I always say to the kids, put that sticker card next to your bed. And every night when you go to bed, have a look at it and say, I'm going to have that full in no time. So I actually instruct them as to what they're supposed to do in order to motivate themselves as well. But yeah, it's fabulous.
So I think I know the answer to this question already, and I will preface it by saying I once did a training in cold reading a long time ago, and the guy that ran the training gave us all a workbook, and if we were brave enough to put up our hands and answer questions or volunteer suggestions, those sorts of things, he gave us all a gold sticker which went on the front of our workbooks, right? But this is a room full of adults. I'm telling you now, this brought out my competitive streak. I was like, pick me, because I wanted to fill up my front cover with the stickers. But the question is, do you use a different method for older children rather than stickers? And in addition, someone has said, does it work with teenagers? I wonder if stickers might seem a bit young for them.
Right, so this is what I do. Okay, so I have an alternative version. It's like a credit card size. It has little spots on it. They have little tiny stickers. I give them the option. I ask them, which do they want?
Yeah.
So I explain that if they've got that card and their friend comes over to their house and happens to see it, they can always say it's one of these cards that you collect stickers on to have a free coffee from somewhere. There's nothing on it that says what it's about. So they can have that as an alternative. But I also do this. So if they choose that, I go, right, so lovely, I'll send that off to you. Do you know what? I'm going to send you the other one. Just hide it in your knicker drawer somewhere. It just lets you have a look at it, and you know it'll remind you of what you're doing. The interesting thing, so my 15-year-old, I've got a 15-year-old autistic boy now. He sits with his sticker card open and all his stickers out, arranged on the table, ready to give himself them. Yeah. And this is a 15-year-old boy. So I've had a lot of surprises about stickers, a bit like Gemma with, you know, we all like to see visible progress, don't we? Signs that we're moving on, and we don't get chances to do that so often. Yeah. So yeah, but I do that, and I do say, you know, perhaps because you're as old as you are, you might prefer this one. Mm-hmm. I've even had an adult take one off me. Mm-hmm. So when I went into that primary school where I had the 6 or 7 that I was doing the project with, the school described this father as if he was some kind of horrific monster father. because he lost his temper. He had a short fuse. So his daughter was one of the ones she was the one who said no, but I managed to persuade her to say yes by the time we'd finished. At the end of the session, his daughter went back to her lesson, and he came over to me and he said, I think I need a magic card for my anger. And I had a few on the table, and I just slid one across to him, and I looked at him, and he picked it up. And I said, well, I could ask your daughter every week, how you're doing, how many stickers she thinks you need, and then she can tell you when she comes home. He said, yeah, that's a good idea. And he picked it up and he took it. And it actually formed a wonderful bond between those two, because she said 3 stickers every week because she adored her dad, regardless of what had happened and the fact that he had a short fuse. She was a child who I also think was autistic. She'd had meltdowns every time she was taken to school. He'd got so fed up of trying to get her into the car and having people stare at him and what's the matter with her and all of this stuff that people do. And he'd smacked her this day as she got into the car. I think she was in reception at the time. When she got to reception, the teacher had noticed there was a red mark on her. She'd said to her, where did you get that from? She said, my dad smacked me. Social services were involved, and he was banned from the house for a year. He was away from the family. Yeah. So you just hear such terrible, terrible stories around this total misunderstanding about autism.
Yeah. So that's an example of actually this being quite valuable for an adult. On the other end of the age bracket, is there a sort of minimum entry point from an age perspective?
I don't know.
Okay.
All I can tell you is the youngest I've worked with. So very soon after Amy had her success, and I mean very soon after, because this was like the September, my own granddaughter had been to nursery. She'd been to preschool, and we'd had hell on earth getting her to preschool. It went, all the crying phase went on and on and on for months. We finally got her settled into preschool, only to have her start at nursery, and it all started again. And I was limp by this time because we were taking her most days and picking her up. I thought, oh, geez, I can't go through all of this again. So I thought, I'm going to try the magic card with her. I honestly didn't think it would work because I thought we're too close. A family link is too close. She knows what buttons to press with me, all of the things that you talk about. So I did this, and she was starting to develop what I could see were like adult mental health issues. She was ritualizing what was happening when she got to nursery. She was saying exactly the same thing, standing in exactly the same place to her granddad. So this particular morning after the conversation, I said, right, Lily, it's time to go then now. And I took hold of her hand and started to walk towards the nursery, and I could feel her tense. And I looked down to say something encouraging to her, and she straightened up, and I could see she was fighting back tears. And I thought, don't, just let her see what she'll do by herself. So I didn't say anything to her. We got to nursery. She walked through the door, walked straight past the nursery nurse, who was like in a state of shock herself because she'd had to prise her off me every other time we'd been there. And I thought, oh my God, she's gone. I thought, let's go. Let's escape quick before she changes her mind. So I left. When I got back, she came flying out of nursery. Grandma, I didn't cry at nursery today. I said, well, that's wonderful. So I picked her up and I said, so how many stickers do you think it is today? So the nursery nurse by this time is at my side, leaping up and down like a thing on electricity. She was going, oh, hundreds, thousands. I said, no. So Lily, how many stickers do you think you need today? And she was just 3. So this was September. Her birthday is August. She turned away and she said, well, I think it's 2, Grandma. I said, why do you think it's 2? She said, because I was going to cry, but I stopped myself. I said, yes, I saw that you did that. I think that's right too. She never cried again. That was it.
Amazing.
what this process has taught me is whatever their age is, whatever their problem is, have a go.
Yeah.
Because it might not work, but they're not going to be in any worse a place than they were when you found them.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of fees and rates, do you recommend a price point that these practitioners should be charging, or is it going to be down to them?
Oh, it's down to you. Once you've got the information, you do what you want with the information. I'm not in the business of managing. I don't want to manage anybody else. I managed people for 20 years. I don't want to manage anybody else again now. It's entirely up to you. I couldn't possibly comment. When I've charged people locally, most of the time it's been people I know.
Mm-hmm.
But even when it hasn't, I've just chalked it up for experience. It's been my learning curve, really.
Yes.
So it hasn't made me a rich woman, let's put it that way. So you decide what's good for you.
And how long are the sessions usually?
The conversation takes about an hour,
Okay.
45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
The follow-up sessions, I usually make them be about half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the time, that half an hour is filled with them trying to assess what they need from you in terms of stickers, and talking about their week, and things crop up and you end up chatting around those. But I always have something that I'm going to do as some kind of activity if all of that fails.
Yeah.
And again, that'll be on the course, the kind of things I do. But you as experienced people will have things up your sleeve as well.
Yeah, marvelous. So just give us a reminder of when the course starts, when it's running until, and how people can sign up for it.
Well, somewhere.
Before you come to that one, Trudy, I've got a lastminute.com question. Do you always do face-to-face, or does it work over Zoom?
I don't do face-to-face unless they're absolutely local to me,
Okay.
because for health reasons, I don't be driving around all over everywhere now.
Okay.
And it's worked absolutely just as well on Zoom. So probably my most challenging case of all, I never met until it was all over and he was fine.
Yeah.
So he was a 16-year-old boy, drug, alcohol abuse, suicide threats and attempts, self-harm, you name it, he had it. And he was a friend of, or his mum was a friend of my sister. So when she asked me, could I help him? I said, oh God, Lynn, that sounds like it's out of my realm, that, but I'll have a chat with the lad and we'll see what, we'll have a go. And I'm a grandma, and for a 16-year-old lad to make a connection, I think it's very humbling.
Yeah.
But he is, if I tell you now that he's just joined the fire brigade, he went to college, he got a girlfriend, he got himself a part-time job from being absolutely rock bottom. When I started with him, I was one of 5 agencies around him. He had a psychiatrist, he had drugs and alcohol team, he had a family liaison team, he had CAMS, they were all there. And his mum said, I made the difference because I was the consistent one that stayed with him, for over a longer period. And there is some feedback from that boy on the website and from his mum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you're going to tell us about training dates before I rudely interrupted us.
Right. So the next training day is Thursday at 7:30.
Okey-dokes.
Then there's nothing else this week. There's nothing else the week after. Then it's Tuesday and Thursday again. Miss a week, Tuesday and Thursday again. And then the very last one, the 9th one, I think from memory is something like the 12th of December. So it's just like a pre-Christmas roundup so that I can keep myself busy over Christmas, working out from your feedback.
Lovely.
How that can contribute.
If someone signs up, and I'm just going to put the sign up link in the chat for everybody again, if someone can't make any of the session dates, will those be recorded and can they catch up later?
Yeah. yes, everybody will get a link to the recording. Yeah.
All right, marvelous. And I think that is about it for all of our questions. So which date is it? I'm popping along to one of these trainings, aren't I?
Ooh, you're asking me now. I think it's the 12th. Wait a minute, hang on.
The 12th, maybe it's the 12th. Yeah. Well, I will
of
be
November,
there
I think.
for one of them.
Yeah.
And specifically, I'll be there talking about the crossover between what Trudy has developed and like she said, there's bits of NLP in there that she hadn't realized were in there when she created it. So I'll be there to sort of draw upon where our parallels are, where there's, you know, you can tell already for all of you that have been here this evening that rapport building piece is not just vital, but it's I mean, it's a skill that clearly Trudy has well under her belt, and I think is such an important piece in doing processes like this. So there's lots of elements of NLP that are in there, and I'll be there on one of those training sessions then to talk through the correlations that I see and where it sort of crosses over into the world of NLP for kids as well. But on behalf of everybody here, I'd just like to say thank you so much to Trudy for sharing all of the backstory of Magical Change with us here this evening. There's so many heartwarming stories that have come out of her dedication to this process and to bringing it really to make a difference to the young people that she knows. And I'm sure that there are many, many more. And certainly with your help coming along and joining us on this training, that ripple effect is going to be much wider reaching and for eons to come into the future. So Nicola said you are inspirational, Trudy.
Oh, bless you, Nicola. That's not what my husband says.
Well, he's not here, so he doesn't count. All right, smashing. So if you haven't already seen it, please check out the sign up link. It's very easy for you to get yourself signed up. There's all of the forms that you need to find out more about the training. Trudy's email is in there, all of the information about how to make that either an initial payment or to pay in full so that you get yourself signed up for this upcoming training. Emma says, thank you. That was really inspiring. Thank you, Emma. Thank you to everybody who has been here this evening. I think we had like 33 people all tuned in at the peak of this. And you will all also get the recording tomorrow coming out to you by around sort of 10 a.m. tomorrow as well. So if you want to sort of come back and listen again, you are very welcome to do so. Any final words from you, Trudy?
Can I just add something? Oh, it's just flitted out my head again. Something you reminded me of then. Oh yes, there's an upper limit to the number of people I can take, and that's only because if I can't have I have another job. I can't be constantly on the Facebook group giving the support to people if there's huge numbers. So I've said that the absolute maximum I can take is 50. And I can't go above that. It's not fair to the people that I'm already helping. So we have got people who've signed up already, but there's 50 places in total. And then if we don't reach 50, that'll be a bonus to me in actual fact, because I'll have less work to do and less stress. And it'll be a cozier atmosphere in there. Whoever's there, you'll get the best I've got, because that's what I've done my life over, is give you my best. And I promise that's true.
Yeah, and we do not for 1 second doubt it. All right, thank you to everybody that attended this evening. Thank you especially to Trudy. I will be in touch with you all again by email, and I'm sure there will be other NLP for Kids events and webinars and videos and articles and all of that jazz coming your way before the year is over. But for now, thank you all so much for attending this evening, and we will see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.